Well, good morning, Transplant Helper community. My name is Jim Merle, and it is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful Alabama day out here. As a matter of fact, even though it's 44 degrees, it's my favorite time of the year. It's fall, the leaves are falling, the trees are just getting this beautiful color to them. And as you can hear, if you listen carefully, other than the car that just went by, you'll probably hear the birds chirping, and I love that. To me, that is just God's music created for us to enjoy and to relax. And that's what I like to do, especially on a cool morning like this. I like to come outside, spend a little bit of time with God, and especially spend a little bit of time in His creation. But anyway, today on the program, I thought we would have a little bit of fun / do each other a whole lot of good, I believe. And that is, I'm going to be asking a series of questions. We might do 7, 8, 9. I don't know. I've got them kind of written down here, but we might do a few of these questions anyway. I'm going to answer them for myself personally, and the whole idea of the program is for us to get to know one another, and particularly to make a program that if someone's coming into this, they're brand new to transplant, maybe they're scared to death, maybe they're excited. I don't know. Sometimes both of those emotions can come at once. But something that they can find not only to watch and hear what I've experienced in transplant in my journey, but more than that, and much more important than that, this is where you certainly come in, where you're commenting below, being extremely active in today's video, commenting below and answering some of these questions from your perspective so that they not only have my experience, but they can have yours. And I would absolutely love if you would do that. So if you want to just pause for just a moment, get you a pen and paper or something and start writing down some of these questions, then you can come back at the end of the video, get in the comments section, just scroll down till you get to it, but get in the comment section beneath this video and start answering out some of those questions. It would be absolutely great. And that way, again, everyone who views this after you can go back and look and say, okay, here's what this person dealt with, here's how transplant was for them, here's what they experienced, and maybe can kind of get to a consensus of what the overall feel and the outcomes of transplant are. Because to be honest with you, transplant outcomes are generally good, but at the same time there can be some differences, some definite differences case per case, and we're all going to be different for that matter. But sometimes those differences can't talk this morning, can be more extreme than others. But anyway, here's the first question. I want you to answer it, and you can do this one very simply. First of all, just state your first name and where you're from. So just state your first name and where you're from. That's the first question. That would help everybody kind of get an idea. If maybe you're nearby, they may want to reach out to you or comment to you because you happen to be the person, in their state or their area. State your first name and where you're from. Don't put your whole name, but your first name. State your first name and where you're from. Question number 2, and this is where we get into the nitty gritty. What made you to need a transplant? What made you to need a transplant? I know that could be for various reasons. If it's like myself, and I can only tell mine, I actually was a congenital heart patient. I had a congenital defect that's from birth, and it was called transposition of the great vessels, transposition of the great arteries, actually at the time, 1975. It didn't come with a really good outcome at all. As a matter of fact, the outcomes for that then were very grave. The surgeries then were very new and archaic, at least compared to today's standards. And the surgery that I had, called the mustard procedure, at 6 months old, was a very, very experimental surgery and very dangerous to go through. But anyway, the surgery did take. It went well, and I made it on through life. I'll tell you more about that later. But yeah, mine goes back to a congenital defect. So tell what caused you to come to need a particular transplant. Question number 2 right here. How long did you wait after you were told you may need a transplant? Now, I did a program the other day about the wait time. I actually did one about don't wait too late. I'll try to link both of those up here in the corners as well as in the description below. And then the final one I did the other day in the series about the wait, I did a program called He Waited 22 Years. And I had so many people that I think didn't watch the video and they took that to mean that this guy waited 22 years on the list, which is the assumption I got when I first heard it, although I knew better. No, that wasn't about waiting on the list for 22 years. It was just about waiting between the time maybe he heard he needed a transplant and the time that he eventually got it. That span was 22 years. But there's a big difference between waiting for transplant, that is being told you might need one day, and getting the transplant, and a big difference between being listed for transplant. Very few, if any, people have been listed for 22 years, albeit there have been people listed for quite a while and sometimes put on the list, taken off the list, put on the list, made inactive. But you know, how long did you wait? That's the question. For me personally, if you go by the term I just used, wait as in that, I waited my whole life. So I waited 38 years, but not really. I was only listed on the official transplant list for 265 days. So a little bit around 10 months, something like that. So my wait relatively to so many wasn't very long, but it was plenty long enough for me. So how long did you wait for transplant? Question number 3. How long were you actually listed? Well, I just told that. Waited for, you might say 38 years, but listed for 265 days. Question number 4. How long did your surgery take? How long did your surgery take? That's kind of a story, really. I was told going in because, again, I was a congenital heart patient who had had a surgery before. They assumed that through the years, all the different procedures and stuff, there'd be a lot of scar tissue in and around the arteries and the heart itself from the procedures and all. And they assumed it would be very problematic. So they told my family to expect my transplant surgery to last about 14 so hours. And that's what I expected when I went behind those doors and the doors closed and the lights were on and I twinkled off to sleep. I assumed it would be that long. My family did as well. But my family, who were all in the waiting room and such as that, were really, really shocked / scared to death when the doctor came out after only 5 hours. So remember, waiting about 14, they assume 5 hours the doctor actually physically walks out. And of course, when they get that word that the doctor's on the way out to talk to them and then he walks out, they are scared to death because after 5 hours, the only option they thought was there is that something went terribly wrong and I'd passed. That's what they assumed. Turned out things went very, very, very well. And so he was coming out to tell them the surgery is over. So my surgery only lasted 5 hours, but that is extremely rare when it comes to a heart transplant. I think 5 hours would be on the lowest end of that. Most surgeries take maybe 8, 10, 12 hours and sometimes more depending on how involved it is. And it's a little different for everybody, but expect more than 5 generally. But mine took 5 hours. I was out and did pretty great. Next question, kind of related to that. How long before you were awake and aware after surgery? Now, keep in mind that they will tell you up front more times than not. Teams will say we expect to take them back for this transplant surgery, in my case a heart transplant. Expect for them to be in recovery for hours and hours. Expect them to be kind of left in a medically induced coma for 24, maybe even 48 hours. I've seen people be left in those comas much longer than that. Even with a heart transplant, expect that the chest cavity might remain open until they can be sure that there's no bleeding, no real complications. So they might do that for a day or two. So for most people, I would say expect to be unaware for 24, 48 hours. For most people, there are a few of us that wake up and get up earlier than that. In my case, particularly, this is again where I was kind of a strange bird because I was only under anesthesia for 5 hours, so only asleep for 5 hours. I actually was awake within 45 minutes. Actually, well, probably sooner than that because within 45 minutes of coming out of surgery, I actually was signing to them. I don't know how I did sign language. I don't really know it, but signing to them that I wanted my breathing tube out so I could talk. They argued with me about that hesitantly. Told me finally they would do that. They took out the breathing tube and I was talking within 45 minutes, beginning to set up in the bed a bit. I think within that same maybe 12-hour period, setting up in a chair beside the bed, and by next day, up walking. And so I did very well, well above the curve. Again, most people don't get to experience that. I can't explain how that happened other than I went into transplant pretty strong. I kept my legs, which is something I talk about a lot, keeping my legs to where with enough strength so I knew I'd be able to get up out of the bed after the surgery itself, and there was a lot involved. But yeah, it was a great experience as far as that goes. But for most people, again, not necessarily like that. Expect to be out of knowing stuff and maybe even unconscious for 24, 48 hours or so. But if you're a family member, especially looking in, don't panic if it goes longer than that. That's pretty common as well. So next question here, let's see, what is it? Number 6 on the list here. Be 7 if you count what's your name and all, but anyway, number 6, officially, what were your biggest accomplishments during your recovery? Your biggest accomplishment? Well, mine goes back again to me being able to be up in the chair and walking within 24 hours. And the very first walk I took, they got me out into the hallway. There were a lot of nurses surrounding me. There were still some machines and lines hanging on, of course. A lot of physical therapy people there ready to catch me if I fell. They had like a high walker, I call it. I don't know what it is. It has arms, a platform up top where you can lay your arms here and position yourself to walk, and it helps to hold some of the machinery and keeps you in a better position as far as that, for me, heart transplant, that sternal break. But first thing I did was, it hurt so bad to put my arms up, I refused to use that. I put my arms at my side like I would normally walk, maybe even held my heart pillow a little bit in the front, but I walked down the hall immediately, and I walked all the way down the hall as far as I could go till the doors were locked down the hall, which is, again, unheard of. Very blessed to do that. And then inside of that first week, I was up to walking miles, 4 and 5 miles even before I left the hospital. So I'm sorry, not 4 to 5, 3 to 4 miles before I left the hospital, 4 to 5 maybe a couple weeks later. But I did, again, extremely well above the curve. Don't expect that. They're not going to require that of you, as a matter of fact. In my transplant center, they ask you to walk a mile before you leave. And they even do that by letting you do laps around the unit. It's 20 laps around that particular unit to get a mile. If you want to walk a lap an hour, 24 hours a day, and end up getting your mile by the end of that 24-hour period, you can do that. But I liked it when I was walking then. I got to where toward the end I was walking a whole mile, stopping, walking a whole mile a little bit later in the day. That's how I was accumulating my time. Started actually leaving the unit because there wasn't really enough space to walk on the unit. So they actually put my telemetry to a setting where I could leave the unit. I was walking around the hospital. Could you do that today under COVID restrictions? No, you couldn't do that. But that's the way I was blessed or able to do it, at least back then. So that question, again, if you'd love to answer, and I hope that you will answer some of these, what was your biggest accomplishment during your recovery? Question number 7, and I do get this one a lot, so I'll answer it and you can answer as well. Did you participate in cardiac rehabilitation? Let's see, I did eventually. I'd already participated in cardiac rehab twice during the wait and all. Just some different things came up. One was funny, I won't tell it again, but yes, I did participate in cardiac rehab. I thought it was very beneficial. I've got an entire video about cardiac rehab, how important it can be, how great it can be in many cases, and how much safer it is than just trying to do your own thing at home or in the gym or whatever. In any situation, cardiac rehab is a great thing. Now, technically, after my transplant, because I was walking so much, so quickly, as I just described, they told me I did not have to go to cardiac rehab. I was fine without it. And I actually didn't for a while. I think it was maybe 2-3 months, and I did not go to cardiac rehab. But eventually I did end up going, kind of a voluntary type thing. The insurance was paying. Why not go? And again, I knew what it was, and I knew I could enjoy it. I knew it would help. So yeah, I finally did, and I do recommend it. But question, did you or would you participate in cardiac rehab program, an organized program after your transplant, or not? If it's not a heart transplant you had, maybe pulmonary, I don't know, different rehabilitation, will you participate, or did you? And then finally here, question 8, I get a lot, and I love to hear your answers. How long after your transplant did it take for you to feel like you were yourself? Maybe not 100%, but to really feel like you. For me, even though that initial recovery was very fast, I would say I didn't feel 100% for almost a year. As a matter of fact, I always tell this. It was at the 1 year mark, I said to myself, hey, Jim, you're okay now. You feel better. I had good days, bad days, still have good days, bad days. Still have days when I can get up and go, days when I can't. But overall, it was about a year before I felt like that. Now, at that year mark, I noted it. It probably didn't actually take a year. If I had to guess, and I'd be guessing, Probably took more like 9 months before I got to that point. I think it was looking back from the year to the 9-month part. That's when I said, hey, it's been a few months, maybe 3, that I felt this good. So transplant is a definite advantage in most cases. The quality of life increase is great. It's certainly worth it in most cases. And I would encourage everyone that, that has the opportunity to go through transplant, know it's going to be your last, it's the last result. It's the last possibility for you. I get it. But if that's where you are and where you need to be, I would encourage you to, talk with your team, talk with your family, talk with yourself, and consider transplant as an option. It is a good option eventually. You'll get used to the medications, you'll get used to routine, you'll get used to all that you go through, and it definitely is a life-giving thing. So anyway, last time I'm begging, please answer some of these questions, help the community out. You don't have to answer them all, but answer some of these questions, tell a little bit about yourself with these questions, and that way anyone in the future who's scrolling can get some experience from you, because we're all together here as a part of the Transplant Helper community. Again, it's been a beautiful day. It's beginning, the sun's moving, so I know it's gotten a little darker here through time, but bear with me on that. Again, love each of you. Stay stronger, my friends.